Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Twitter, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. As always, I am Bryson Carver. Great to be with you on this Thursday afternoon, and I just have a message for everybody out there. Football starts tonight. I know it's just a Hall of Fame game, but dang it, I don't care. It's football. Jets, Browns. Be talking about both teams tonight. I did this last year. I forgot who it was. I think it was the Raiders and the Jags, if I'm not mistaken, in the Hall of Fame game a year ago. I talked about, the expectations long term. Well, I don't know if the Browns or certainly the Jets definitely are in this position to look long term, because for the Jets, they're looking about how do we attack this window right now with Aaron Rodgers as our quarterback? How can we contend for numerous Super Bowls? But in the short term, what is the ceiling for either team? What is the floor? What is the worst we can expect from the Jets and Browns? And what is the absolute best we can expect if everything goes right, or converse, or on the other side of things, if everything goes completely sideways, which it kind of has for both teams in the entire Super Bowl era, aside from obviously Super Bowl III with the old Joe Namath guarantee. I'll get to those two teams later in the show. Also looking forward to getting into this. Bill Belichick has alluded to a potential quarterback controversy in New England. I don't know if you heard, but it sounds kind of intense between Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi. And we know the old Belichick quotes about how, is on to Cincinnati and everybody's competing, blah, blah, blah. No, but I think there's some truth potentially to him, thinking about moving on from the old Maxter, from old McCorkle. I'll get to that later in the show. Also, obviously, carving up the context, our midweek segment, which I'm very much looking forward to getting this one, because this one I did a little research into it, and I was like, hang on a minute, something is not adding up in terms of how something is being portrayed. I'll get to that at the end of today's show. Also going to talk about Shaquille O'Neal. Now, we hear all these former players talking about top 10 players ever, and Shaquille O'Neal did something a little different. He gave his top 11 players, which one might say, like, hey, that's weird to do 11. Like, it feels like you just want to include somebody's name because you feel bad for leaving him outside the top 10, right? No, Shaq's saying, no. I'm going to do something completely different with this argument that not a whole lot of other people are doing. And I'll talk about that a little later in the show, and why I commend Shaq for doing this, because he's adding nuance to this discussion that, frankly, I don't think gets added onto enough, in my opinion. So I'll get to that later in the show. And before we get to our league segment, I did want to say this. So Tuesday evening at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific time here on the Grid Network. If you're watching on the Grid's YouTube channel, we appreciate that, as well as anyone else who's watching anywhere else. So we debuted a new show on network. It's called the 8 o'clock spot. Here's the logo. I'll show it to you guys right here. The 8 o'clock spot, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific time on the Grid Network's YouTube channel, and of course on our Twitter page as well. And the feedback, so just to briefly describe the show, think of it as a sort of spin-off-ish of Around the Horn on ESPN. It's kind of like a game show. It's a half hour long, maybe a little more, a little less. We have panelists. So in this instance, it was Barry, Grant Jr., Devin Nettles, and Mike Guido, all three members of the Grid. Barry and Mike obviously founded the Grid, and I'm the host. And I have a point system in which we do a few takes, like what's going on in sports. They give their opinions, and I do the point system based on their takes. How good are their takes when it's all said and done? And ultimately, there's a winner. And so you rack up, obviously, there's a winner for that particular show, but there's a point total. And then once we get to the end of the season, which we think will probably be around the NBA Finals next year, the 2024 Finals, when the Warriors win the championship, be that as it may, we will have a season-long champion. So we've gotten incredible feedback from that first show. We appreciate everybody who tuned in live to comment or just to watch and have a good time. Had an absolute blast with those guys. And it's going to be a rotating panel. It's going to be different people every week. I'll be hosting certainly as much as I can, hopefully on a weekly basis, on Tuesday nights, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific time on the Grid. If you haven't seen the first episode yet, you could check it out on the Grid Network's YouTube channel. But we had an absolute blast, and definitely looking forward to next week. It's gonna be a blast once again, and everybody who was involved did a great job, and look forward to see who our panelists are going to be for next week. So appreciate all the incredible feedback that we've gotten to this point from that. So I don't want to, usually in the preseason, I try and stay away from, unless it's just a big story, like Sean Payton talking crap about Nathaniel Hackett and the Jets trying to buy a championship and saying Hackett did the worst coaching job he'd ever seen in NFL history, which, by the way, I kind of agreed with. I wouldn't say worse in NFL history. I think Urban Meyer would probably take that title, certainly in recent years. But, I liked it. He's backing up his team. What I hated was the walk back. But that's a big story. Like, I try and mostly stay away from, let's be honest, little stories. regarding some of the high-profile teams. This year's going to be the Jets. The Broncos have a lot of attention on them. You got the Kansas City Chiefs, the defending Super Bowl champions, and the Eagles. A lot of teams have got big aspirations, big goals, big expectations going into 2023. It's just I try to stay away from the little stories, but something big that's different. I couldn't help myself with this one though. I couldn't help it. So, Trevon Diggs, star corner for the Cowboys, got a big contract. And Dak Prescott, star quarterback Cowboys, also has a big contract. Two of the highest paid players in the team. And there's a play in practice where there's a play where Dak goes through his read real quickly, sees nothing there, takes off running to his right, and he's shoved out of bounds, I think inside the 5-yard line-ish. The video was taken by Clarence Hill, who's done a great job reporting for the Cowboys for years. We weren't able to get the video on the show today for some odd reason. It's StreamYard's giving me some issues with that, but we'll see if maybe we can show it to you later in the show. But Dak is shoved out of bounds. Okay, he's out of bounds, plays over, whistle blows. And Trevon Diggs, here he comes. He gets into Dak's face, and Dak and Trevon, they're jawing. And Trevon, to use the clean version for the kids out there, said, "Shut your BA mouth" to Rain Dakota Prescott. You can fill in the other letters for those two words. And all I'm seeing today. Oh my God. How could Trevon Diggs just, he's going after his quarterback and doesn't even respect Dak Prescott. And, there's trouble brewing in Dallas. We need to take cover. Hang on. Is it safe to come out? It is? Okay. Just want to make sure, because I was worried there for a minute. Guys, we're really doing this for training camp? Listen. Anybody knows my experience with the Dallas Cowboys has been an up and down one. I started as a Cowboys fan around 2015, middle of the 2020 season. I was, by the way, I was a Dak fan before he was a Cowboy. So when he became a Cowboys, I was overjoyed. He had some really good seasons there. And then when Jerry didn't give him that contract in 2020, I was mad about it. When Dak broke the ankle in 20, I was like, I'm done with the Cowboys. I'll just support Dak. And then finally, I chose a team that I could root for, the Pittsburgh Steelers, while though simultaneously I will continue to support Dak in the capacity that I had the last few years, thus me wearing this Dak Prescott hat, which is available on his website, by the way. But I'm not one to overreact to stories that some tend to overreact to. If you remember the Draymond Green, Jordan Poole incident, no, it's a different sport, different league, different team, different expectations. Let's put it that way. At least different realistic expectations when you compare the Golden State Warriors to the Dallas Cowboys. But Draymond Green, Jordan Poole get into practice. Draymond punches Jordan Poole, became the season-long controversy, kind of derailed the Warriors season in terms of how Poole responded. And they traded him, obviously, for Chris Paul, and that ship has sailed. But I remember coming on the show and saying, guys, I don't know if punches like that happened where it looked like Draymond could have easily broke Poole's jaw. But pushing, shoving, fighting, cursing each other out, especially during football training camp, that's as true as the sky is blue, or as the star is blue in Dallas. They're in California. It's hot. They got pads on. They got helmets on. They know there's big expectations. These are two of the highest paid players of the team, two of the most important players on the team. Both big egos, big trash talkers. Yeah, words are probably going to be exchanged. And Trevon Diggs was answering questions to the Dallas media today and was asked about, oh my goodness. And again, I'm not going to cast aspersions on the reporters saying who overreacting to this, because I don't know whether they did or didn't. But this says Trevon Diggs. This is from today, folks. This is from about an hour and a half ago. Trevon Diggs on trash talking with Dak Prescott during practice. Quote, I feel like it makes practice fun. At the end of the day, that's my brother. I love Dak to death. There's nothing behind it. It's just competitiveness. It's just football. End quote. And then we was asked on people who say he doesn't have respect for Dak. Trevon responded, quote, Stay out of our business. People don't need to worry about what we got going on. Our relationship, my relationship with my brother. Dak is the leader of this team. He's going to go out there and have a great year. I have the utmost respect for Dak. Dak Prescott, even today in a press conference, was asked about this entire situation, this controversy. And Dak was asked about the trash talk, and he said, quote, "I start a lot of it, honestly. I spark it a lot of times. Some guys practice and play better when they're talking trash. I invite it." Listen, I know we're in August. I know the preseason, we got the Hall of Fame game tonight, is as irrelevant as it's ever been. With the lack of starters not playing, everybody can get up for the regular season, keeping the starters healthy, seeing what you got in terms of your backups and your draft picks and whatnot. That doesn't mean we need to make a big story out of a nothing burger, because that's what this is. This whole thing, like, oh, the Cowboys defense, they showed up in that game against the Niners last year, but Dak was bad. And that's why Trevon Diggs was saying, folks, you're playing football and you're playing sports, you're in any competitiveness whatsoever. It doesn't go that deep. Come on. By the way, I think for the record, it should be noted that Dak was the biggest reason. I can even say this as a Dak fan. Dak was the biggest reason Dallas lost that game to San Francisco. No question about it. He played bad by his standards. Trevon wasn't great in that game either. But do I think that this little riffraff had anything to do with those two going at it? I hesitate to say this, but you can tell at times when some individuals either didn't play sports or didn't play it at a very high level. This is frequent. When the Golden State Warriors, and there was that whole issue with Draymond Green, you think Steve Kerr was mad at Draymond or mad at the idiot within the Warriors organization who sold the tape off to TMZ so the world could see it? Because I promise you, if TMZ, I don't even know if TMZ exists in the 90s. They probably did. I don't know. If TMZ got in the clip from when Jordan punched Steve Kerr, we probably wouldn't romanticize it the way that we do today. And by the way, there were no fisticuffs, no punches were thrown, no shoves. We've seen Travis Kelce sock two teammates at practice. Business as usual. It's football. It's training camp. It's hot. It's hot. It's August. It's preseason. You're trying to get better. You're trying to iron sharpens iron with your teammates. We are really overreacting to a situation that doesn't need to be overreacted to. This notion that Dak and Trevon, they got this beef. No, they don't. Trevon Diggs said months ago in the playoffs, talking about he loves Dak. He's this fierce competitor. He wouldn't want anybody else leading the team. Yeah, I'm sure that's changed in 6 months. I'm sure Dak has an issue with Trevon now. Come on, folks. This is no big deal. This is not a story. And the fact that folks are making it out to be shows you how desperate some are for a headline, for a story. By the way, just the fact that I'm even talking about this shows you, to put it mildly, we don't have the number of big stories today as we will a month and a half from now. When it's week 2, week 3, and we're starting to see what teams may or may not look like over the course of the season, and early MVP discussions, are starting. But that doesn't mean we need to make a story out of a 2 to 3 second exchange. Look, do I love Trevon Diggs using that particular word with Dak? No. I don't think that word should be exchanged between anybody. That's one of the most disrespectful words in the English language that a man could say to a woman could say to a woman, or a man could say to a man. Like, that's kind of the one you don't push. That's why I didn't like what Draymond said to KD 5 years ago. Was he right? We don't need you. We won without you lead. To a certain extent, yeah, he was. Because the Warriors won before KD and won after KD. Didn't have to include the 5-letter word starting with a B and ending in an H, but it is what it is. This is not a story. I hope tomorrow, when we get back to, I'll be doing a show tomorrow. A lot of people are going to be doing their shows tomorrow. Hopefully this is behind us. This is in the past. Listen, there's plenty of stories surrounding the Dallas Cowboys. There is every offseason, every training camp. Jerry does a State of the Cowboys speech going in, and we're going to win the Super Bowl, and this most talented team we ever had. Same old. Cowboys going to win the Super Bowl. We've heard it. We could talk about those. But maybe we went to this one because it's a news story. But like I said, let's not overreact more than we should. Okay, so Speaking of quarterbacks, speaking of situations regarding teams that have pressure on them going into the season, I think it's fair to say that not a soul, let me pause there, not a logical soul expects the Patriots to exactly be contenders this year. Some I've seen them predict to go to the playoffs. I was talking to a buddy of mine, Grady Edwards. He's frequent listener and viewer of Carving Up Live. Shout out to Grady, he's my man. But he was saying he's a Patriots fan. He's saying, hey, I think we can make the playoffs. I'm like, I think it's gonna be tough. I think it's gonna be very difficult. You got the worst roster in the division. But if it's a Belichick-led defense, if whoever the quarterback is, and I'm just about to get into that, whoever the quarterback is kind of plays mistake-free football, they've got an actual OC instead of a DC masquerading as an OC. You got Bill O'Brien in the building. Got Juju Smith-Schuster, and there's some nice little pieces. Nothing crazy, but nice little pieces. Maybe a sneak in. I highly doubt it, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. But nobody thinks the Patriots are going to be going on any kind of Super Bowl run. Championship number 7 is not coming to Foxborough. I hate to tell you, Patriots Nation, but it ain't coming in 2023. But they have pressure on them in a different reason. This is year 3 for Mac Jones. Year 3, what's the Bill Parcells rule that I cite often on this show? Year 1's the developmental year. Year 2, you need to see a big jump from year 1. Year 3, if you're still not quite certain if he's our franchise quarterback, then you move on and start at square one. That's the year for Mac Jones. By the way, that's also the year for Justin Fields. Justin Fields has improved receivers. Justin Fields plays in a division. I shouldn't say division. North. The NFC North actually isn't bad. He plays in a conference where you're going to have 3 open wildcard spots, and the Bears are absolutely talented enough to get one of them. Let's see if Fields can show up. So there's pressure on Mac Jones in the AFC with the Patriots. There's also, you've heard the reports, hey, Belichick might be in the hot seat. Since Brady left, losing season in 2020, got to the playoffs in 21, but got beat by, 30 to his division rival Buffalo Bills. 2022 missed the playoffs under 500. So there's some heat on Bill going into this season. But Belichick was talking about the quarterback competition. And he was talking about how, he was asked if there's a quarterback competition between Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. Remember old Zappi started a couple games last year for the Patriots, looked pretty good against the Lions and the Browns. Whereas Mac Jones struggled a little bit. Same defensive coordinator calling plays for the offense, but well, I'll get to that aspect later in the segment. But Belichick was talking about this, and I wanted to get the sound bite, but I said, you know what? We know how Belichick sounds. Let me try and do my best Bill Belichick impression. Here we go. Asked today if there's a quarterback competition between Jones and Bailey Zappi, Belichick said everyone is competing. And I quote, everybody's out here competing. All 90 guys. That's what we're here for. Compete. Everybody's out here competing. Everybody's out here competing. That's what everyone's doing. End quote. Asked if he had a good relationship with Mac Jones. Belichick, quote, I think my relationship is good with every player. Hope that was good for you guys. Okay. By the way, hope that was good. That was just me. That wasn't me as Belichick. Typical Belichick sound bites, on to Cincinnati. We kind of know how that goes. But do I think there's a quarterback controversy in Foxborough? Darn Skippy. I actually did a segment about this months ago. And I kept the graphics because I'm like, this may come up around training camp, so I want to have them ready for the show instead of having to redo them again. Just have them ready just in case. And case. I decided, you know what? Mac Jones started 15 games for the Patriots last year. I'm sorry, 14 games for the Patriots last year. Bailey Zappi started 2. He appeared in 4. He played in the Green Bay game in place of an injured Brian Hoyer, and then he came in for Mac Jones when Mac Jones was struggling on Monday Night Football against the Bears. So, Bailey Zappi has 4 appearances. Mac Jones started 14 games last season. So it wouldn't be fair to say 2 to 14. If we're talking just specifically starts, 2 to 14, it's like, well, the 14 is a larger sample size. You're going to have some bad games. It kind of all evens out. So what we did, just to be fair to Mac Jones, who I've said since the beginning, since the second he came to the league, he's a backup quarterback. Point being, let's look at Zappi's 2 starts against Mac's best 2 starts, just to be fair to the kid. And for the record, if you look at the numbers, Mac's best 2 starts, Thanksgiving Day at Minnesota, who, by the way, had the second worst pass defense in the National Football League, and the Cincinnati Bengals. And I believe that was week 16 in Foxborough. That was his two best starts. So combine those numbers, average those two out, and average Zappy's two starts out. Let's look at Mac Jones' best two starts. Here we go. 311 yards per game for the Maxter. 4 touchdowns, no picks. That's pretty good. 112 pass rating. That's really impressive. And the team averaged 22 points. Right? Like that's you'll take that. That's points per game. You prefer that to go up, but it's not a deal breaker. As long as the quarterback's showing up, he's efficient, he's playing well. That's all that matters if you're the New England Patriots. But if you look at Bailey Zappi, not that much of a drop-off in some of these numbers. So Mac's best two starts, he went from 211 yards per game. Zappi, 248.5 yards per game. So a big drop-off there, but 250 ain't bad. Mac, 4 touchdowns in his best two starts, by the way. Zappi, in his 2 starts, through 3. Mac, 0 picks. Zappi, 1. So Mac, Zappi turned the ball over, but it is not that big of a gap. Passer rating, Mac Jones, 112. Zappi, 109. Almost identical. And points per game. This is my favorite. Mac had 22. Mac's offense has averaged 22 points per game. Bailey Zappi's offense has averaged 33.5 points per game. They're kind of the same guy. And again, that's Mac at his best against just the only 2 opportunities that old Zappy got. Is it unfair to have this crazy suggestion that maybe, just maybe, they're the same quarterback? For the record, I don't think Zappy's the long-term answer in New England. I don't. A little more mobile than Mac Jones. A little bit better of an arm. By the way, Zappy was a pretty good quarterback in college. This is a little known fact. He broke a lot of. Remember, Joe Burrow had what I called on this very show the greatest season that's ever been had in the history of college football quarterbacks in 2019 when he won the Heisman. LSU went 15-0. It's the greatest college football team ever. Won the national championship. Zappy broke a lot of those records. I know for a fact he broke the record for touchdown passes. Burrow had 60. Zappy had like 61 or 2. So he's a nice college quarterback. But again, I don't think he's a long-term answer for New England. But I've seen enough from Mac Jones to know, yeah, that ain't the dude. Because I remember talking about on this show during training camp last year, where Mac Jones, the reports come out of New England from Tom Curran, who's a great journalist in Boston. And he said, man, guys, you should see this. Mac Jones is not looking good. And I remember saying on my show, I'm like, look, I don't have high expectations for Mac Jones to begin with. He's not his tangibles, let's put it that way, aren't exactly going to blow you away. Arm, below average. Accuracy, I already mentioned arm strength. Mobility in the pocket is horrendous. I mean, Belichick didn't trust him to throw a Hail Mary in a dome from the 50-yard line. There's a quarterback for the Buffalo Bills that can throw it to 50-yard lines, but that's neither here nor there. But I said going into last season, I said, you know what? I'm not going to be hard on Mac Jones. You can check the tape. I said that. I said, I'm not going to be hard on Mac Jones. What's he working with? Weapons aren't good, and got a defensive coordinator as the offensive coordinator. It's not an ideal situation. And if you remember, because Mac Jones got hurt actually in week 3 against the Baltimore Ravens, that's part of what opened the door for Zappy to even get on the field. Because Brian Hoyer started the next week against Green Bay, but I think he got concussed. I know he got hurt. I think it was a concussion. And here comes this raw 4th-round rookie, Bailey Zappi. Doesn't blow your socks off, but is fine. Like, he's for a 4th-round rookie making his first appearance at Lambeau Field, he wasn't bad. His next 2 starts, Lions, Browns. Crap, the offense looks kind of versatile. They're pushing the ball down the field. They seem to trust Zappy more than Mac Jones. Mac Jones comes back, Monday Night Football, Chicago Bears. Mac looks horrible. Zappy comes in, back-to-back scoring drives. Like, timeout. Zappy might be the guy. So one of my sayings I have on the show, I can have an opinion on something. But because that's what it is, an opinion is not a fact. But when new facts present themselves, sometimes you do have to adjust your opinion. I didn't anticipate this fourth-round rookie working with the same defensive coordinator that old Mac was working with. Looked solid. Again, I don't think he's a franchise quarterback. I don't know for a fact. I don't think Zappy's a franchise quarterback. Doubt it. But has Mac Jones done enough to prove that he is absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, 100% the guy in New England? Not in the slightest. Sure, he helped a team get to the playoffs in 2021 when his role was that of a game manager. And then when he was asked to go toe-to-toe with Josh Allen twice. Check that. 3 times. Remember that Monday Night Football game? Patriots, Bills in Buffalo. Josh McDaniels, who I know isn't that great of a coach, but he was a nice offensive coordinator. Brady liked him. Josh McDaniels only wanted Mac Jones to throw the ball in the entirety of that game twice. Mac Jones actually checked out of a run play to a pass play, and Josh McDaniels was beside himself. Like, why in God's name, as a quarterback, would you throw the ball? Check to a throw play. Might have been a bad read on Mac's part. I think it was a pass to Jonnu Smith, if I'm not mistaken. Jonnu Smith kind of bobbled the ball, came down with it. But yeah, Mac Jones' stat line for that game, I get it was windy, but the Bills trusted Josh Allen to throw the ball, 20 plus, 30 plus times. Mac Jones 2 for 3, 13 yards. Next time they played, Mac Jones was horrendous against Buffalo. Josh Allen flourished. And the final time they played in the postseason, in that wild card round, Josh Allen scored every time he touched the ball, and Mac Jones dropped a whopping 17 points. And as a matter of fact, that was Belichick's first 30-point playoff loss in his career. Listen, I've said Belichick is kind of just another coach absent Brady. I think the numbers kind of bear that out, especially when you compare him to the likes of an Andy Reid or Kyle Shanahan. He's not incompetent. He's not a bad coach. He knows. This is not a surefire thing that number 10 is going to be your starter for this season. So this preseason, there's not going to be that many teams I'm going to be like zeroed in, have to watch in the preseason. Listen, I'm going to watch Carolina with Bryce Young and Houston with CJ Stroud, but I'm going to watch the teams with the rookie quarterbacks, Colts with Anthony Richardson. I'm going to watch Patriots preseason games. Zappy, Mac. Curious to see how this plays out. By the way, so the NFL, I just wanted to throw this out there. The NFL does their top 100 every year. Players vote on this, and I've talked about it for a couple weeks on my show. But they put out the episode today. They ranked the top. They ranked number 20, the 20th best player in the NFL, to the 11th best player in the NFL. At number 20, and I'm not joking here, they had Myles Garrett. They say Myles Garrett is the 20th best player in the National Football League when he is clearly, and I don't think anybody would argue this, and even as a Steelers fan, I can say this because I respect greatness. Best, second best, third best pass rusher in the NFL. And he's 20th above him. George Kittle, my man Minkah Fitzpatrick in Pittsburgh. Max Crosby for the Raiders, another edge rusher. Now listen, Max Crosby's an excellent edge rusher. He is not, he's not Myles Garrett, not even close. Bills receiver Stephon Diggs, Niners linebacker Fred Warner, Niners offensive tackle Trent Williams, Raiders wide receiver Devontae Adams, Raiders running back Josh Jacobs, Rams defensive lineman Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald's a bit too low. I think we're overreacting to just one injury-riddled season. I think he's still a great player. Not the best in the league anymore, but he's still great. But to put... sometimes, listen, I'm not doubting the player's perspective in the slightest. I'm not. But how they could watch the tape of the film and whatnot and say, I think there's 19 players in the NFL better than Myles Garrett. I'm just having a hard time seeing that. I must say. So, speaking of which, again, we do have a football game tonight. Kicks off in about 2.5 hours-ish. About an hour and a half-ish. 6:30 Eastern here. Game kicks off a little after 8. Jets, Browns tonight. Hall of Fame game. There's some notable players for both squads getting inducted. Darrelle Revis Island, one of the greatest corners in the history of the game. Probably the greatest corner in the 21st century, if we're being completely honest, at least to this point. And for the Browns, you got Joe Thomas, one of the greatest offensive tackles ever. Remember, didn't miss a snap until he unfortunately suffered a season-ending injury. I believe that was 2017. Yeah, that was 2017 because this is his first year of eligibility. And it was just a rock. Played with some just horrible quarterbacks in Cleveland, but was always steady, was always there, was always great, and is one of the greatest left tackles we've ever seen in the history of the league. But Jets-Browns square off tonight. And obviously, I don't think we have, again, rational people, although when have we known folks in Cleveland to be rational with their teams, just speaking from experience as a Warriors fan, dealing with Caps fans. Shout out, sort of, to Mike Guido. Seriously, though, Mike Frozone Guido. Watch the 8 o'clock spot, and you'll know why we call him that. But nobody expects the Browns to compete for a Super Bowl, but a lot of folks expect the Jets to compete for a Super Bowl. So I guess that begs the question. In a conference which is known as the AFC, which is undeniably the better conference, not even close. I see two real contenders in the NFC. Two teams that can absolutely be anybody in the AFC should they reach the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 58 in Vegas. Philadelphia, San Francisco. I'm starting to buy a little more stock in Dallas, but it's Dallas, so there's always a caveat, like they're going to find a way to screw it up. And Detroit, I think, is going to get to the NFC Championship game. I've said that for a long time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I think they're contenders. It's just that the NFC is that weak. AFC, different story. Kansas City's going to be back. Bengals, assuming Burrow's healthy, they're going to be back. You've got the Ravens, I think, are going to be scary this year. And I hate saying that as a Steelers fan. I think the Ravens are legit. I think Pittsburgh's going to be good, not a contender, but good playoff team. You've got teams like, say, I don't know, Jacksonville Jaguars. I think Trevor Lawrence could be in for an MVP potential campaign. We'll see. So in an AFC with 4 division winners, most of us kind of agree on who those division winners will be. It's those last 3 spots. Crap, who takes all those? Well, starting with Cleveland, I think that's their ceiling. If Deshaun Watson, because I don't think it's fair to expect him to be the player that he was in Houston. Maybe it is, I don't know. But taking time off from the sport, a lot of time off, I shouldn't say taking time. It wasn't exactly his, off the field, it was his decision, allegedly. It was not his decision in terms of being suspended, but he put himself in a position to be compromised, and he's had to bear the consequences of his actions. But missed 2021, suspended for 11 games in 2022, played the last 6, didn't look so hot playing in them. But full offseason, Kevin Stefanski, I think he's an excellent head coach. I think I saw a report today saying Kevin Stefanski is in the hot seat. I'm like, why? This is like the first good coach Cleveland's had in years. He's not the issue. Got to the playoffs with Baker Mayfield, for crying out loud, who's being beat out by Kyle Trask in Tampa. That's how we got to the playoffs with 11 wins. That's why I think it's the Browns' ceiling. 11-6. I don't know if I'm ready to go and say they could win a playoff game, but they've got a great running game with Nick Chubb, tremendous offensive line. A guy I just mentioned a second ago, Myles Garrett on the defensive line. It's a very good defense in Cleveland, very good secondary, good coach. It's all going to, by the way, good receiving core. Amari Cooper, Cedric Tillman. I'm telling you, folks, Tennessee guy. He's gonna be like a jump ball type of dude, red zone guy. David Njoku's a good tight end. It's going to fall on Deshaun Watson. Can Deshaun Watson get to some semblance of the player that he was certainly in 2020 with Houston when he was incredible? He was a top 5 quarterback at that point. But even 2018, Deshaun got to the playoffs with Houston. 2019, Deshaun won a playoff game in Houston. Can he get to that? If so, Browns can go 11-6, not win the division, but potentially win a playoff game. If Cleveland could do it with Baker Mayfield 2 years ago, why can't they with a more talented quarterback in Deshaun Watson? As for the New York Jets, expectations are on getting Lombardi number 2 to MetLife Stadium, or I should say technically Lombardi number 6 to MetLife Stadium because the Giants have 4 of those. Jets have 1 from Super Bowl 3. By the way, the first Super Bowl that was actually called the Super Bowl. But because I've talked about the Jets ceiling. The Jets ceiling is winning the Super Bowl. You got a Hall of Fame level quarterback who's not what he used to be, but is still great, still top 10 level guy, and you can always win with those. Excellent weapons with Garrett Wilson. Breece Hall coming back healthy. It looks like Dalvin Cook. It seems to be it seems like it's a formality. Like the formalities, everything needs to be sorted out, but it seems like Dalvin Cook's probably going to be a New York Jet. Their defense was top 3 in the NFL last year. And again, with a team that had 4 quarterbacks, was smack dab in the middle of the playoff mix until the second to last week of the season. So I think this Jets team can win the Super Bowl. I'm not guaranteeing they will. I'm not going to pull a Joe Namath here. What's their floor? Probably 8-9. If everything just goes haywire, goes sideways, 7-10, 8-9, I think is their floor. By the way, Cleveland's floor is right in that same ballpark. I think 6 wins is Cleveland's floor if Deshaun's the same player as he was a year ago. Plus, the AFC North is brutal. It's the toughest division in football. AFC East is no slouch either. Buffalo's a 13-win team for the last 2 of the last 3 years. You consider Josh Allen's a top 4 quarterback in the NFL. Yes, Trevor Lawrence is better than Josh with Burrow and Mahomes, obviously. Good coach in Sean McDermott with the Dolphins. Dolphins are great just about everywhere except for quarterback. I'm not saying Tua is not good. He is good. I'm not sure he's at the level that folks are projecting him to be. And even if he is, can he stay on the field? If he does, if he reaches his full potential, given the talent around in Miami, given the coaching with Mike McDaniel, yeah, the Dolphins could be a factor in 2023. They can win that division. And then New England's New England. Belichick's still a great defensive mastermind. The Jets haven't beaten the Patriots since week 16 of 2015. Since Ryan Fitzpatrick was the quarterback there and Todd Bowles, the head coach, has been that long. That game actually cost the Patriots the 1 seed that year, fun fact. But if everything goes haywire, so Salah's in over his head, which I don't think is going to be the case, but listen, 2 losing seasons, albeit with bad quarterback play. Rodgers ages is an old 40. Remember Breeze? Drew Brees was in the MVP discussion in 2018, had a very good 2019. He missed 5 games due to injury, but played very well in 2019 and was shot in 2020. Wasn't the same quarterback. He was never a guy who could push the ball down the field, but his arm was like Mac Jones. It was like a noodle arm. Didn't move all that well. Just kind of looked small and became a little bit more fragile as a player as time went on, as he got older. Could that be the same with Aaron Rodgers coming off of his worst season? Obviously, injuries come into play as well, but we put those aside. That applies to every team in the NFL. Historically, defenses aren't. Jets were top 3, top 5 level of defense. Historically, defenses who were top 5 in the league, top 10 in the league, don't tend to be as good the following year. That's why I think folks that are seeing the Broncos, hey, if the Broncos offense is competent, they could be. And I remember reading a stat on the show last year that if the Broncos were just okay on offense, they would have won like 12, 13 games. That's how good their defense was. That's how horrendous their offense was with Russell Wilson, Nat Hackett running the show. Are we sure the Broncos defense is going to be awesome again this season? We can ask that same question about the Jets. So if the defense isn't as good as we expect it to be, the offensive line, by the way, is an issue. I think Pro Football Focus had it as a bottom 3 offensive line in the league. That's a problem. Aaron Rodgers is used to playing with great offensive lines in Green Bay. Is Aaron Rodgers due to that or due to the fact that he is going to be 40 in December? Does age catch up to him? I don't think so. He seems more committed than ever, but if that is the case, that is something you got to worry about. So I think the Jets' floor is 8-9. Their ceiling is, I don't really care the win total, 12-13 and winning the Super Bowl. The Browns' ceiling, 11-6 and a playoff win. Their floor, 6-11. Just swap the record, 6-11. If Deshaun is the same player that he was a year ago in the limited action that he got. So it's all a wait and see type of situation, but I'm interested to see how Zach Wilson looks tonight. Apparently he's going to get the start for the Jets, and it's just crazy how everything has kind of turned so quickly in that Zach Wilson was the future just 2 years ago. And again, going back to the Bill Parcells rule, like by year 3, if he's still not the player, they didn't even let Zach Wilson get to year 3. They're like, man, screw this guy. Let's bring in an old Hall of Fame level quarterback. That's how bad it got at the end. But Zach Wilson, work ethic, leadership skills or lack thereof, he kind of has himself to blame in that regard. So we just got to wait and see how it plays out. Also, too, I think it's it's interesting with the Browns. And I talked about this on Monday. There's a world in which they're one of the greatest fourth place teams ever, because I do think they're probably going to finish last in the North. I still think the Ravens could compete with Cincinnati, especially now. God forbid, I hate the Burrow injury, but now, knock on wood for Burrow, with the Burrow injury, Do the Bengals, like they did a year ago, get off to a rough start? Remember, they started 0-2, losing to Pittsburgh and Dallas before they kind of got back on their feet. But if Cincinnati gets off to a rocky start, Baltimore, with all this young talent, an upgrade at wide receiver, a great defense that really came on at the end of the season, and now an offensive coordinator that fits Lamar Jackson's skill set with John Harbaugh, who's one of the best coaches in football, did they catch him for the division? Pittsburgh feels like kind of a shoo-in to be 2 or 3 right in that category. Man, if you put, and I said the other day, if you put Cleveland, I think it was Cleveland I said this about. I said, yeah, if you put Cleveland and say the NFC South, I think they'd be the favorites. Because the Saints should be the favorites. They have the best roster. They have, this isn't saying much. I love Carr, but this isn't saying much. They have the best quarterback in that division. Best roster, best defense. I do not trust Dennis Allen whatsoever. He's won like 33% of his games? Going back to his time with the Oakland Raiders and now last year with the New Orleans Saints. He's a great defensive coordinator. There's plenty of guys like that. Great coordinators. Not that great of a coach. But it's frequent. It happens. We'll see how it plays out over the course of time. But yeah, it's I don't know. I don't buy into New Orleans that much. But if you put Cleveland in that division, let's say Deshaun plays to the level of a Derek Carr, the roster in Cleveland is no slouch, and the coach is absolutely the gap between Dennis Allen and Kevin Stefanski is quite substantial. That's an interesting conversation to have. When Cleveland win the NFC South, which we all recognize is the worst division of football, I think Tampa Bay is probably going to tank in that division. But we'll see. I'm not doing my preseason predictions. Today's August 3rd, so we got a month and 4 days till opening night. Kansas City, Detroit. Detroit, who's going to be at the NFC Championship game. I'll say it again. I don't know. It's going to be, I can't wait for the season, folks. I love football. By the way, going to have a special guest on Carving Up Live tomorrow. Be sure to stay tuned for that. I don't want to tease it too. This is kind of already a tease. I don't want to spoil it too much, but I think you're going to like this person we bring on. Only NBA discussion of the day. So we get to that. This is really the dead space in the NBA offseason. This is when we're talking all football, some baseball. Trade deadline just happened. Yet the Verlander trade from the Mets to the Astros. I think Verlander's going to do a solid job. He's not had a bad year by any stretch. It's Scherzer who was really struggling with the Mets. Verlander's still a great pitcher, even at this stage of his career. By the way, the Mets got Drew Gilbert, my man from the University of Tennessee. Got to give Tennessee guys love on this show if nobody else is going to. Just putting that out there. But I think Drew Gilbert's going to be, he's an excellent prospect, and he's going to do a solid job if he gets the opportunity to suit up in a Mets uniform. I hate that for him. I hate that's his predicament. It'd be much better to be in Houston, but hey, at least we don't have to worry about him in the future trying to compete with the Astros for the AL pennant. But I think the Mets are going to be listen, they're in a rebuild situation. I think the Astros got better with that Verlander trade, as did a number of teams at the trade deadline. So we're talking Major League Baseball trade deadline. We're talking NFL training camp preseason. This is the dead space in the NBA offseason. Schedule probably comes out in a couple of weeks, and that's about all we'll talk about, barring a Dame Lillard trade. Like that's kind of like that one we're just sort of waiting for it to happen, but there's not really been that many updates. I mean, I saw something the other day that Miami is putting their best package for Portland. Yeah, no duh. Yeah, it's Damian Lillard. I sure hope you are. Don't lowball Portland. Shaquille O'Neal came out with his top 11 players of all time, And he said in no particular order for the record. And so folks might say, well, he did 11, so that's like a cop-out. It's like, well, you got to take one of those guys out in order for to be a top 10, that round number. Top 10, we always do our list like that. We don't do top 11. But Shaq did his top 11 players of all time, and he fashioned it as, who would I want to be my starting 5? And who would I want coming off the bench? And here's what he had. I'll read it off for the podcast audience, those listening. So the starting lineup would look like this. Magic, Kobe, MJ, LeBron, and the Diesel himself. The bench. Steph, AI, Duncan, Karl Malone, Isaiah Thomas, and Kareem. I think he slid Kareem in there just to be like, oh shoot, I forgot Kareem. Like that's you can't forget the third greatest player ever and the second all-time leading scorer in the history of the NBA. I want to commend Shaq, first of all, for two things. that you often see a little bit of a tease for carving up the context that I'm going to do later in the show. You often see players from previous generations kind of disrespect guys from, I'm talking about not young guys, because young guys haven't made their name yet. I'm talking about guys who we know, surefire, no doubt, Hall of Famers, 15, 20 greatest players ever. Got to give them all the love in the world. Your LeBrons, your Stephs, your KDs. As time goes on, Giannis, eventually, as more time goes on, Jokic. They tend to not give those same guys love. Like, well, back in my time, this player would have, and it'd be some like average center in the 1980s. Like, guys, come on. He's not better than Jokic. He's not better than Giannis. This guy would not lock up Steph Curry or Kevin Durant. LeBron would be great in any era. I want to give Shaq credit for not doing that. And he tends to give some of the current generation of players their love and their respect. I give him credit in that regard. But, and I also want to give him credit too for doing something that very little do in these debates. And that is adding a bit of nuance. Saying sometimes it isn't about who's the 10 best players. 7-game series, who's your starting 5? And again, put it up once again. It's a starting 5. Magic, Kobe, MJ, Bron, Shaq. Bench, Steph Curry, Allen Iverson, Tim Duncan, Karl Malone, Isaiah Thomas, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now the folks ask you, well, Bryson, what would be your starting 5? Well, who would be coming out the bench? Well, so I think that depends on the rules of the starting 5. If it has to be, hey, this guy played this position primarily his whole career. For example, LeBron has mostly been a small forward his whole career, but he can play the point. Heck, he's played the 5 at times. It's very versatile, very Magic Johnson in that regard. That's different. If it's just which 5 players throughout the history of the NBA fit the best. My starting 5 would be Steph at the point, MJ at the 2 guard, LeBron at small forward. I would actually put Larry Bird over Tim Duncan. I think Duncan's the better all-time player, and certainly he's a power forward. Larry's a small forward. I'd actually put Larry Bird at power forward. Great shooting, great playmaking, great defense, and I would put Shaq as the 5. Kareem's the better all-time player, but if we're talking at their peak, Shaq is the greatest player of all time at his peak. Go check his if you don't believe me, go check his finals numbers in back of the day against you had the New Jersey Nets, you had the Indiana Pacers, you had who was that other team they played in that three-peat? It's crossing my mind. But like those are the type of dudes who like he was destroying those teams. Destroying. He used to average 35, 13 and 2-3 blocks on insane shooting splits. Like that's how great Shaquille O'Neal was. Now, coming out the bench, yeah, you'd have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Yeah, Kareem's your backup center. You're in pretty good shape. You'd have Magic, obviously. You would have, I think Allen Iverson's actually kind of interesting coming out the bench. Of course, you would have Kobe coming in for Jordan. That's why I've always said when they do this, hey, 6 players, and it's usually the same 6. It's Steph, it's LeBron, it's KD, it's Kobe, Michael. Like, add another one, Tim Duncan. It's like take one player out of this 6. And I always say, with all due respect, God rest his soul, Kobe Bryant, I always say take Kobe out because he's an ever so slightly lesser version than of MJ. Same guy. Why'd I have the same guy in the starting lineup? And folks say, wait, how you have Magic over Steph? Well, I'm sorry, Steph over Magic. Well, 2 reasons. A, when it's all said and done, Steph will go down as the greatest point guard ever. He's not there yet, but he will. And secondly, Bron can do all the things Magic can do. Not quite the ball handler Magic was, but can handle the ball, can play make, can play defense at a high level, is versatile in what positions he can play. LeBron's a better Magic. That's what they say when they compare LeBron to Jordan in terms of styles. I say, if you want to say the greatest player ever, yeah, it's between those 2. But stylistically, MJ's best comparison is Kobe. LeBron's best comparison is Magic. Like Steph, there really is no comparison. I know I've heard some say Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, who you see the similarities there in terms of how they played, but he never got to the type of level. There was some other stuff that factored in there, obviously, that never really allowed him the position, the ability, not the ability, but the opportunity to get to a great level where Steph has gotten, but you do see the similarities there. I'm talking about amongst all-time greats. Like, we don't really have that much of a comparison to Steph. By the way, I probably have Draymond Green in not my starting 5, but come out the bench. I need a guy to hold dudes accountable. I need a dude who is a jack of all trades, get in people's faces if they're not doing what they're supposed to do. I don't know. That's probably a controversial take, but I don't care. I need Draymond come off my bench for me. But yeah, and I just appreciate Shaq for again. This is a discussion that oftentimes we just paint over like who's the best, and at the end of the day, that's we often forget some of the other nuances that come into the fray. So let me get this pulled up here because it drives me crazy, and this, I think, perfectly segues into my next segment. Hold on, if I can pull this up. Because for some reason, the video that I'm using won't let me pull up the streaming platform I'm using won't let me pull up the video. Okay, so. Okay, yeah, here we go. So, all right. Just want to make sure I had that ready. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, for a news segment, and increasingly becoming one of my favorite segments on the show. It's carving up the context time, folks. So, on today's episode, I shouldn't say episode, on today's edition of Carving Up the Context, we have a quote here. We weren't able to get the video in. We have a quote from one of the greatest basketball players who ever lived. In my view, the 13th greatest basketball player who ever lived. Julius Erving, better known as Dr. J, was one of the great, arguably the greatest player of the 70s if you include his ABA career. Actually, I should say that Kareem's the best player of the 70s. I'd say Dr. J's right behind him. Point being, Dr. J was doing an interview recently, and he talked about a range of issues going on in the NBA. He talked about a range of topics. And he even did his top 10 players of all time, which was a horrendous list because it didn't include LeBron, didn't include Steph. It was a horrible top 10. He barely slid MJ in there, for crying out loud. But that's not even what I was worried about. He was talking about super teams, and this has often been a big discussion in the NBA. He was talking about super teams. And here's his quote. Quote, "These guys, since prisoners are running the show and not the warden, it's just where a star player on the team is like, oh, screw this city and all the support they've given me, and I'm going south. I'm going to Florida. I'm going to LA. I'm going to Texas, or I'm going somewhere else. These decisions, and they're business decisions, I understand, but they have not helped the game. They have not helped keep parity within the game when you build these super teams." He was also talking about Damian Lillard, and he was talking about how he's going to go somewhere else, and that's a different situation, right? He tried to win in Portland, he couldn't do it, he wants to go elsewhere. He said, quote, "That's a good reason to leave. But a guy 26 or 27 just wanting to hop around, how many times has Durant hopped around? Look at how many times Durant has hopped around. No, for real. OKC, then Golden State. Now he's in Phoenix." And I saw that, and I was thinking, hang on a minute. And Dr. J is a legend. He's a true legend, no question about it. But it made me sort of get to thinking a little bit about a trivia question. This will be a trivia question for Carving Up Live. Let's bring it on the screen right here. I'll read it for the podcast audience. Here's the trivia question. Which former MVP who'd never won a championship joined a team that had another MVP and 2 Hall of Famers that had just lost in the finals to the best player in the world, only to come back with said MVP, with the player that joined, and win 65-plus games and capping their season by winning the championship against the team that beat them with 1 loss the entire playoffs? I'll read that one more time. Which former MVP who had never won a championship joined a team that had another MVP and 2 Hall of Famers that had just lost in the finals to the best player in the world, only to come back with said MVP and win 65-plus games and capping their season by winning the championship against the team that beat them with 1 loss in the entire playoffs. Give you a little bit of time here on carving up the context. 3, 2, and 1. You are correct. It is Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant made that exact decision by going to Golden State. He had never won before. Never won a championship before in Oklahoma City. That's why he left. He went to Golden State in free agency. They already had a former MVP in Steph Curry. They had 2 other Hall of Famers in Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. They had just lost the finals to the best player in the world, LeBron James. But they came back with Kevin Durant, won, this is 65 plus, they won 67 games, came back, beat LeBron, beat the Cavs in the finals while only suffering 1 loss in the entire postseason. They went 16-1, only team in history to do that. Not the only team to only lose 1 game, but the only team to go 16-1. But KD wasn't the only player in NBA history who's done that. You know who else has done it? A guy I think is the most underrated player in NBA history. Moses Malone. One more time, I will read this question. Which former MVP who had never won a championship joined a team that had another MVP and 2 Hall of Famers that had just lost in the finals to the best player in the world, only to come back with said MVP and win 65 plus games and capping their season by winning the championship against the team that beat them with 1 loss the entire playoffs? That's what makes it funny. The guy that Dr. J criticizes, Kevin Durant. Dr. J was the beneficiary of the exact same decision. The 76ers in 1982 lost the finals in 6 games to the Los Angeles Lakers and a guy who was at the time the best player in all of basketball, still, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem was still incredible at that stage in his career. Lakers won the finals in 1982, won in 6 games. Sixers were still good, by the way. Dr. J was an MVP in the league. They had 2 other Hall of Famers, Bobby Jones and Mo Cheeks. But they added Moses Malone, who joined them in free agency. Not 1, not 2, a 3-time MVP. That is, folks don't realize how rare that is. LeBron's done that. MJ's done that. Kareem's done that. Magic, Bird. There's not a lot of guys who won 3 MVPs throughout the history of the NBA. Very, very short list. And Moses Malone is on that list. And he joins. The 76ers go 65-17. And Moses Malone himself, infamously going to that playoffs. Because at the time, there wasn't 4 rounds of the playoffs, there was 3. Moses Malone had the famous quote. He said, we're going to go faux. Meaning, we're going to win. We're going to sweep all 3 series. 4-0, 4-0, 4-0. He said, faux. Well, came up just short of that. Swept the Knicks, 4-0. Gentlemen swept, so they lost a game to the Bucks. And then swept the Lakers, the same team that beat them. It would be nice if Dr. J, again, one of the greatest players of all time, undeniable. 13th is where I've got him, just outside of the top 10. He's that great. He would not have a championship if not for another great player making the exact same decision that Kevin Durant made. So, a little context would be nice in the future for Dr. J and for future greats who criticize guys like KD for going to better opportunities, going to teams that give them a better chance of winning the championship. I rest my case. Simply put, this seems to be a bit on the hypocritical side from Dr. J. If not for Moses Malone, potentially, he may not have won an NBA championship. He won the ABA, to his credit. He won the ABA before the ABA and NBA merged to become one league. He didn't win the NBA. And if not for Moses Malone, might not have won at all. So, I just saw that and I was thinking, time out. He played with 2 other Hall of Famers, kind of like Steph Curry. Now, Steph had won before. That's the only difference. But Dr. J was an MVP. Steph was an MVP. They just lost the finals to the best player in the world. Dr. J lost to Kareem in the Lakers. Steph lost to LeBron in the Cavs. They added a generationally great player who had won MVPs in the past but had never won a championship. Came back the next year and tore up the whole league. and beat the team that beat them in the finals. Seems a bit hypocritical, I must say. By the way, this is another opportunity for me to say that, yes, the 2017 Warriors are the greatest team ever assembled. It's not even close. In my view, I always say the 0-1 Lakers to me is the only team that would have had a chance against those Warriors. Because what the heck were we going to what were we going to do about Shaq? Who are we going to throw at Shaq? Zaza Pachulia, a guy who somebody else who Shaq has had, or Shaq in the past. They've reconciled now, but Shaq all the time had on Shaq to the fool on TNT. JaVale McGee would go put JaVale McGee on Shaq. We wouldn't have an answer for Shaq. Conversely, or similar, I should say, they wouldn't have an answer for Steph. Ron Harper's going to stop Steph. Drew Holiday couldn't stop Steph. Tony Evans. Tony Allen couldn't stop Steph. What the heck are they going to do about Kevin Durant? What are they going to do about Kevin Durant? Kobe would have taken Clay. That's different. What the heck are they going to do about that 6'11 guy? Could score at will. But I would give him a shot, certainly more so than I would have the 96 Bulls. But I think, again, we talk about greatest teams ever. 83 Sixers are in that discussion. No question about it. 13th greatest player ever, Dr. J. 14th greatest player, Moses Malone. A combined 4 MVPs between the two. Went to the finals. By the way, Moses also won finals MVP, kind of like Kevin Durant won finals MVP. The similarities between the 83 Sixers and the 2017 Warriors are staggering. Almost identical situations. A little context in the future would be nice, Dr. J, I must say. And that's not even counting your top 10 list, which was abysmal. Abysmal. I mean, all due respect to this player I'm about to mention. All the respect in the world, he's underrated too. Not as much as Moses Malone, but he's underrated. To have Tiny Archibald in the top 10, Hall of Fame level player. But Tiny Archibald in the top 10 players of all time, you take Tiny Archibald over LeBron James. Like that. It does drive me crazy when players from previous generations in any sport just kind of poo-poo on the players of the current generation. I didn't like that at all. That's why I give props to Shaq in the last segment for not doing that, because he didn't do that. To his credit. All right, that is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody for stopping by. Be sure to catch Carving Up Live tomorrow. Gonna have a special guest at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, right here on Twitter, as well as the Carving Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. And be sure to like, share, comment, and take 2 seconds out of your day. Hit that big red subscribe button. Helps the channel grow exponentially. And be sure to go subscribe to the Grid Network. That is GRYD, the Grid Podcast Network, right here on YouTube, as well as any and everywhere you get your podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, any and everywhere you get your podcasts. I'll be back tomorrow. Like I said, special guest. Looking forward to having this person on. It's going to be a great conversation, great discussion about a range of topics in the world of sports. So stay tuned for that tomorrow, 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific. But I hope everybody has a great evening. Great Hall of Fame game, baby. Let's go. I don't care that it's the preseason. I don't care starters aren't playing. It's football. I'll take it. Okay? It's been 6 months. It's been too darn long. Okay, but I'll see y'all tomorrow. Have a great evening, everybody. Please continue to stay safe out there. Please be sure to take care of your physical as well as your mental health. And please be sure to contact your local state representatives and senators to demand change for gun violence in America. Looking forward to the Hall of Fame game tonight. It's going to be fun. Jets, Browns, it's football. I don't care. It's preseason. It's football. I may talk a little bit about it tomorrow, depending on what happens. I don't know. We'll see. Be safe, y'all. See y'all on Friday night, 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific time, Twitter, YouTube, on the Carving Up channel and the Grid Network channel. Be safe out there. God bless you all. Peace out. Football, baby. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.